guys, welcome to another awesome interview with Concept Design Club. This is going to be a little different video than usual. Today we have Eddy Einikis here, who's a concept artist in the industry. He's worked on many titles before. And Eddy, if you could just introduce yourself quickly, give us a little summary of who you are, what you've done, and what productions you've worked for in the past.
I got my start in 2D game art, actually. So when I was in school in Columbia College, Chicago, they mostly teach you like 3D and 3D type stuff in the art section of game design.
Mm-hmm.
And while doing that, I slowly decided that I wanted to do more stuff for concept art.
Mm-hmm.
At that point, I ran into an opportunity where somebody found like some like pixel art stuff that I was doing for a really, really tiny project while still in school. There were a couple guys in San Francisco, and I still work with them to this day because we've released a couple games, and I keep doing some work for them and rotations and stuff like that. But the main big game with them was called 1849. It's like a little indie city builder 2D kind of game. I did all the buildings, all the background, all the little characters that walk around, the animations goes on, little props around it. I mean, and up to and including the logo and some of the icons in the UI, practically everything you see in the game and the promo art. So it was kind of like a many hats and jack of all trades thing first.
That's really cool.
And yeah, we did that. And we did. Did you want like a complete history or just kind of a?
Just a little summary, just here and there. Just say what you worked on.
Yeah, that was the first thing. I kind of did everything for that game. After that, the next game they did was called Project Hi-Res, which is also like a strategy management game, which is it's like you manage like a building that's like if you were to slice off like a side of a building and see all the rooms inside, it's that kind of thing. And so I made again all the props and rooms inside, and designed the people that walk in, and did all the previous the concept art leading up to that, and the promo material, etc., logos. That was kind of that got me started in actually like earning a living doing art. After that, obviously during this whole time, I kept up some amount of personal work and doing just regular concept art and designing characters and environments or whatever felt fun for me at the time. And it was more lately, I think, like the last year or so, I've gotten like quite a few just freelance gigs of just people coming to me from all over the world. Got a few from Asia that would just ask like they have their little indie game or whatever, and they need a character design, and they have me do that. So I've done a few of those, and one I almost forgot about. That was kind of in between the first and second game, was my only so far kind of experience in a big company concept art type thing, was at Nether Studios in Chicago, and it was like a limited time contract for about 8 months, working on Mortal Kombat 10. Wow. And I was doing mostly props and kind of little monsters and the less significant things, because I was really just starting out back then. They had the more senior guys do the characters and whatnot. So I did that, then got back to those games, then did a bunch of freelance stuff, and nowadays I just kind of bounce around between all those. But I still do some 2D art for games, particularly for those guys that I still work with.
That's a really cool That's a really cool history you've got there. You've worked in a lot of indie stuff and a lot of AAA stuff. So how did like the indie work you did for the people in San Francisco vary from the big work you've done for the AAA studios such as NetherRealm?
Oh, where to even start? For one, I mean, it was a bit of a different type of work, just on a basic level, because I was making in-game 2D art. So some of it was like it's going to be, for example, for 1849, it was an isometric type of looking down like map. So like I'm making buildings that are like just in that orientation, and I need to keep them consistent. It's not just like here, design a pretty building and put it on a piece of paper. No, it has to be a pretty building that also can go into the game and work within the game. and be looked at people or whatever, right?
Mhm.
So different just on that basic level. But in terms of like what it's like to work, for tiny companies and big ones,
Mhm.
some of the same stuff people usually will tell you. I mean, I had a lot more responsibilities with the indie company. I
Mhm.
had to art direct myself for the most part. Obviously I would consult them on like what do you like, this and that. Like there are a lot of the small decisions and even big decisions that I would have to make myself. I would have to establish my own style. Initially, like they just came to me with like, oh, we need basically everything done, make it look good. That was about it, And they told me, here's the setting, here's the game we're going for, let's arrive at a look. And I would consult them with it, but like it was mostly up to me to do everything from scratch and from the bottom up to eventually just making all the different varieties of buildings and characters. Um, yeah, it was a lot of responsibility, a lot of hats to wear. Obviously, like I said, I did some graphic design, and so at the big companies, it was just all it was very specific because I did like I said, just start for props and some monsters in the background of the levels and Mortal Kombat,
Mhm.
and they were obviously very particular with what they wanted. They tell me, I'd give them a sketch. I would have to email the main art director as well as like several other leads or whoever else was above me. They would all look through it. They'd get back to me if it's good or not. I'd give them another pass, sometimes a third pass. How many
Okay.
it takes.
I
Uh,
see.
there was a lot of like more like corporatism, corporate like yeah, it was more like just strict and uptight, I guess. Um, and obviously, I had established hours, so I had to go to the office, 10 to 6 or whatever. Whereas when
Mhm.
I worked with a indie company, it was just I'll pick my own hours and I track them, as best I can.
In terms of details, I was thinking, what exactly, like, was the company feel like, or did you feel like you had a much tighter leash? And would you honestly recommend starting off in indie versus shooting for AAA, as most college students typically don't do?
Mm-hmm. Oh, you're saying they don't usually shoot for AAA,
Oh no,
or
I'm
the other way
saying
around?
the other way around. Most students, when they get out of
Right,
high
right.
school, they think,
Uh-huh.
okay, I'll work for Blizzard. But would you recommend them starting off in like a lower, more indie route and work their ways up?
Okay, I would recommend starting with whoever pays you. It's not easy to get somebody to pay you to do art. Um, if you have a choice, I mean, do whatever seems will be more fun, I guess. I mean, because whoever it is, whatever company, you probably know the kind of games they make and the type of genre that they do stuff in. And if it's an indie company, it's the same thing. As far as like again, if you have a choice um, and you want to know the actual like differences besides those, it's you'll likely wear more hats at an indie studio. You might have to do some stuff that's a little different. You might have to do a logo, whatever. It depends how indie it is too. Because I was working with two guys, so it really was everything art related. Whereas there's some indie studios that are maybe a dozen, and they might have that taken care of. So again, depends. But uh, besides that, at the bigger studio, it might be a bit less freedom to influence the game in any way. They'll have an idea of what they want. They'll tell you, design this or that, and obviously, yeah, it's up to you to do the visuals, but like, it's not really up to you to have any influence whatsoever on like how the game will play, or maybe have an original idea for a character or any of that stuff. So in an indie studio, you might get to actually come up with the character, from the ground up, or work together with the people to do it. In a big studio, you're likely gonna, just gonna get a brief. It'll be everything that it needs to be. It's not up to you to decide whether it's, a human or an orc or whatever, um, or is it an environment or a prop. Secondly, in a big studio, I mean, no matter how much of a rock star you are, you're gonna start, probably at the bottom, doing like really basic stuff like I did. It's going to be props. It'll be some weapons. It'll be, boxes. It'll be little environment objects. It'll be maybe some kind of critters, that kind of stuff. Depends what kind of game, but like it'll be small stuff. It won't be the glorious, like, I made Superman or I made, uh, Mortal Kombat. Sub-Zero, whatever the hell,
Yeah, that's actually pretty
Keep that in
surprising.
mind.
Okay, well, dude, I was actually pretty surprised hearing when you said you worked in NetherRealm because you have it on your art station. I was surprised that you only said that you worked on props and environments and the smaller things. When you work on art station, it's like so like grand and it's pretty amazing. Also, your style is pretty consistent.
Thanks,
So just to hear that, oh, I worked on a barrel or two, it's like wow.
Yeah, I had the Mortal Kombat stuff on there too. You might have to scroll down a bit, but it was like, yeah, it was some. I remember it was on our station. I have it was like some kind of ghost spirit character, like a
Mhm.
demon. That was probably the coolest thing I did there, and it was the demon that appeared whenever I believe one of the characters in Mortal Kombat would like do his attacks. It would like appear as a like extension of him, like it would be like a ghost that would like reach out and like strike. So I designed the ghost. So that was like the closest thing to like something higher up that I did. It was still a good time. Like I mean, I did learn a lot there. It was again my an experience of a big studio, so I knew what that's like. I knew whether I wanted to do it or not. I made some friends. I learned how to work with senior concepts artists and game directors and stuff like that. And it was a good overall art skills kind of increase, I guess, as well, and like collecting reference and sort of just it's all valuable because even if you're just making weapons or whatever, like then you know how to make weapons. Like for example, I came away from that like really having improved in particular my skills with like rendering metals, because I had to do a bunch of like spears and stabs and all kinds of stuff like that. And so I knew how to do that, like the shininess, kind of the weathering and stuff like that on things, which still comes in handy. Well, regardless of what I do, I might just be doing my own character now, and I'm just doing a weapon for them, but those skills come in.
Oh, absolutely, I'm sure. Now, how exactly did you go about getting those jobs? Like, you say you know two guys in San Francisco who you contributed to their game, but then like you go from that to working at NetherRealm. How exactly did getting those jobs even work out?
All right, it was a combination of things. At first, like my very, very so this I didn't quite cover because I didn't want to get super long-winded, but might as well get back into it now. While I was still in school, my last year, and it was one of the few classes there that was actually taught us 2D stuff, like concept type stuff,
Mhm.
and I took them as soon as they showed up. Um, and there was this teacher that like halfway through the class, he said, his friends that run like a toy company, they 3D print like little zombie toys or whatever,
Mhm.
that they were gonna decided to branch into like doing a game, and that they were looking for artists, students to hire for cheap, basically. And they're like, you guys can apply here, and talk to them. So I did, as well as a few other kids. Um, and they asked for us to do like a sample piece, and it was going to be a pixel art type game. It was going to be pixel art in game, little buildings, little characters, that kind of style. And it was themed like a zombie apocalypse type thing. Anyway, I put in like a couple designs. I think it was a character and a building, um, as did some other kids, and they picked me and another girl that also did a really good job
Mhm.
out of those. So his friend, like this teacher's friend, got back to us in emails and met us, and we worked with them mostly like from home remotely. Yeah, we didn't come in or anything, and we kind of tracked our hours, and we got paid like I don't know, 10 an hour, I think, something like
Wow.
that. But that game never materialized. Like they never really finished it. I think there were a lot of problems because the guys that started it weren't developers, and when they're going from one business to another and they had no clue. They just kind of hired a bunch of people and kids to do stuff without really having a concrete plan, and it kind of fell apart.
Mhm.
But I did make a bunch of stuff, in that time while it was happening, and it was posted somewhere on a blog, not even by me. It was by somebody else that like that stuff was made. It was like shared by somebody. And the two guys in San Francisco, they saw that blog when they were looking for artists or styles and things for their game, for their future game, that was just getting started. It was going to be their first game too. And they reached out to me in email saying like, we liked your pixel art thingies on this game that we found on the blog. Would you like to work with us? And I asked them about pay and like how's this all going to work with them being away and everything. They said it's all cool. We'll just work over email and we'll pay you that time quite a bit more. I remember it surprised me. I was like, yes, I agree. Sounds excellent. You know.
Oh
Um,
man.
and from there on, yeah, we went into what I already told you, like those two games. And in between those two games, it was the NetherRealm thing. The way that happened was, again, they reached out to me because I think one of my classmates worked there. One of the really good like 3D modelers worked there. May have been even a couple of people, and they mentioned, I guess they were looking around for some like junior concept artists. They needed to fill some roles for Mortal Kombat 10 for it to like release in time and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And they're just, it's a lot of word of mouth. So if you have classmates that you're friends with, or they know that you're really good, or whatever it is, uh, they might drop in a word for somebody where they're at, or whatever. And that was the case for me. I think it was a couple people dropped the word in, and maybe they saw a portfolio or whatever online, and they reached out to me and emailed to me. And at the time, I was in a bit of a in between those other like indie games, so I just take it on. Especially seeing as it was just a contract, it wasn't a full time like position. At certain points, it was like full time hours, but it only lasted like 8 months, like, as I said. So they reached out to me. I was excited because it's like a AAA studio. The pay wasn't great. The pay was pretty terrible, but the experience and the sort of having stuff on your portfolio from a AAA game would be worth it. So I went and took, like I said, it was still a good time and it worked out. I did that. I finished it and I got back right into the indie stuff. And like I said, more lately, I'm doing that plus just little freelance gigs where I'm completely my own boss and it's just people finding me on ArtStation or wherever else. I've gotten a few from DeviantArt way back in the day, a couple years ago. But various websites, yeah, people just email you and are like, I have this thing. Could you do a character environment or something like that? And
Okay.
like, I haven't actually like really applied to companies ever. As crazy as that might sound.
Yeah, that's actually pretty bonkers.
Yeah, like the only one you could count as that was like that very first like student project that like was looking for people, and we sent in like, if you will, like emails of interest. But after that, like it was all kind of people that found me. It was the other way around.
That's actually pretty nice. Like the idea of just having studios just come to you and say, "Hey, can you do this thing?" Like even NetherRealm came to you. That must have been pretty.
Well,
I
was
guess like the opposite of humbling.
like I said, the pay wasn't crazy there, so I'm sure I was a good deal for them.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, they did find me
Yeah,
through
like
friends or whatnot. Yeah.
of all the artists on ArtStation and all the artists they could find, like they chose you, which must be pretty ego boosting, I bet.
Yeah, I mean, all I can say is work hard. Put it out there. Go show off like your best things. If you're remotely popular, and I'm really not, like my station is like, I don't know, 1,000 people, followers or whatever, which is some of the big ones are like 20,000 and so on. But people still find me, and I was almost surprised. And this like really got a lot of like little small and bigger gigs recently, like past year or so. But
wait, so
I mean, your work speaks for itself usually.
got it. So on that, like, what portfolio tips would you give to students so that they can make their portfolio or their ArtStation page or the website or whatever be good enough so that companies can reach out to them?
First of all, just get good. I know it sounds really basic, but it really comes down to that. Like once you develop your lighting, form, composition, anatomy skills. Depends what you focus on, whether it's environment or character or both. Some of those things are more important than others. For example, perspective is really important in environment and props and vehicles. In characters, a little less so. I know guys that do a lot of character work that barely know perspective and are like in awe of like how I do these lines and stuff. And I'm like, I don't know, it just comes to me now. But get those basics down, and as you train yourself, and again, I know you asked about portfolio, but like, I think it's how you learn is like just as important to that, because your overall skill is basically going to determine how your portfolio is going to look. And there's some tips for that too, but I think like less important. I like the sites like ArtStation or maybe DeviantArt or whatever it is. Instagram even. I mean, some guys are popular in there. Because it's an already established platform with like tons of users, including like employers and studios and people making games and so on.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning you're gonna get seen. If you have the show, people will see it. Whereas if you have your own website, well, you have to send links. And even then, I don't know. I don't think the traffic's gonna be crazy unless you're like some really well-known guy like. Any number, but like you just somebody getting out of school, or maybe only have like a job or two on your belt. You're not going to drive mad traffic to your website, so it's I think easier to reach people, including employers, and be noticed on websites that already have followings and traffic, such as ArtStation. Especially in particular because ArtStation now is like. But since ArtStation came out, it's almost see no need to create like a separate site for myself because it's like so clean and pretty. I see very little downsides as far as like showing your art, and like I said, you have it immediately like kind of built-in audience and including professional audience. So I wouldn't do much else besides that. As far as what you show, like, well, don't show your every single sketch and thing or whatever. Like, put up your best finished or more or less finished work, and update it frequently as soon as you get better and you make better stuff, put it up there. Like I said, it more comes down to like if you're really good, people will see it, people will click it, and the profile will get a bit more popular, and then people that are looking for artists will start seeing it as well.
Okay, that makes sense. Just get on the platform that has the most eyes and make sure your skills up to par.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you want to talk about just training yourself and all that stuff, we can get into it. But go ahead.
Yeah, actually, I'm very curious on that. How would you recommend students train themselves to be like at a higher of a level?
So I would first of all, the reason I mention that is because outside of a select few, most art schools I don't think do an adequate job. Certainly mine didn't. Like I said, there in the entire like game art program, there were like only a couple of classes I could take that were even to do with concept art. Right, the rest of the stuff was 3D art. There's programming we had to take. It was kind of a mixed bag. There was some animation, which some of those skills still came in handy. Don't get me wrong, but there was very little focusing on what I eventually decided I wanted to do. So I came away not like too prepared. And I don't know, maybe some schools are better at that. I know certainly like there's some schools that are built for that, such as if you know who Feng Zhu is.
Mm-hmm.
There's Singapore that's like entirely concept art and super intensive, and it's like a year of just like hammering it out and teaching the fundamentals and stuff like that. So I really respect him and just everything he's doing, and I would imagine that that's like a good worth value for your money in terms of schooling, something like that. I know there's also Gnomon. I think they do a good job. But outside of like the traditional universities, and a lot of them have game programs now, or game art, or whatever, or just art. I think they're not always up to par. So you do need to train yourself, and you do need to like go above and beyond of what's like asked of you and like assignments and like things like that. Let it be maybe a start, but then like, take it to the next level personally. And the way I would do that is, you go through the fundamentals really, like study lighting, form, perspective, shape. Do a lot of quick sketches. Don't try not to get bogged down doing really detailed finishing things before you've actually gotten to the point where your groundwork is good. If your like character doesn't have the correct proportion, or doesn't have the right musculature of a human or whatever you're trying to draw, going in and rendering their skin out, and their like all their hair and all that stuff is not gonna it's still going to look wrong. And somebody might see somebody's just, somebody that's a master that just does a quick sketch and just maybe lines, not even shaded, and they will find that more appealing and cooler looking than what you spent, potentially a whole weekend or a week doing. I would say focus on, the quick sketches, focus on studying, focus on observing, like, drawing from life. Not necessarily physically, like you can find just tons of pictures of like naked models and so on to like copy. But it's nice to go to like figure drawing sessions too if you're like into the character stuff. As far as environments are, again, there's tons of resources. I remember I used to go on to Google Earth and just kind of pick a random point on the globe along the street, in some other country or whatever, and kind of just draw that real quick, like paint it out.
Whoa.
It's a super random way to like find scenes to like paint and study. Mm-hmm. It is a lot of just drawing from what's around you. Like pay attention to fill, as Feng Tzu says, just fill your head with like culture and anatomy and things that are real in the world. Because everything you draw in terms of concept art is only going to be kind of some kind of a spin-off or a mashup or a play on something that already exists, and you just kind of do a little customizing and a little adding of combining of elements to create something like unique. But it always comes from somewhere. You don't create just some like 8-legged tentacle whatever random thing and expect people to identify with it, because people identify with things that already exist. So you have to like have like an anchor to reality in whatever kind of design you do. But that's why you study, the anatomy. That's why you study animals. That's why you study environments, lighting, and stuff like that. Now you might want to like maybe specialize. Maybe you really want to just get into characters only, in which case you really prioritize the environment and like fashion studying, like clothing, stuff like that. But yeah, practice a lot because especially at the beginning, most of your early work is going to be not really up to like professional standards. It's just like normal, like you need to take, I don't know, for students, I think that maybe really put in the work during, let's just say a 4-year, school time, then I'd imagine towards the end of it, stuff that you did in the last year could be potentially really good, I'm sure. That could populate your profile already. Now, obviously, once you do get the skills and you specifically look into like, okay, what do I put in the profile? Well, some say like tailor it to things you'd like to work on. So if you want to work on, some kind of modern action games or shooters or whatever, companies will look for things like soldiers, sci-fi weapons, tanks, stuff like that. If you want to work more on like fantasy and RPGs and stuff, they'll look more for creatures and maybe environments, maybe like fantasy type characters. And show your work, especially in ArtStation. It makes it really easy to do now because each upload you can put several images in it, so you could have your beauty shot of like your maybe full environment or your full character. But then below you can show like, oh, I drew out these details, I drew the back of the character, I drew out their props, maybe label it a bit. They call them call outs, I think, where it's like, oh, this is this part of the character, this is that part. Things like that. I'm doing a lot of that because you can show how things work, and where things are, how things look behind the character. If you're making the concept for somebody that's going to make it. So they like to do that, and I'm sure it helps though that maybe just take some screenshots of the work as you want. Such that later you can like compile them either into a set of images or maybe a GIF, or maybe just record a video as you do it to show like your literal like here's the stages of doing this thing, so they know for sure that you did it and you can do it how you go about it. So that's in terms of the profile. Those are I think good tips to show.
Okay.
It's just like. In terms of training, there's tips, but it comes down to just time and like elbow grease and I hate when people say like, oh, I don't have a artistic part of my body or I wasn't born with it or whatever. Like, none of us, like I wasn't 7 and making like what I do now.
Right.
or whatever, you know. And then I started more seriously, like, you know, breaking down, like, oh, what's anatomy like, you know, what muscles is it made of, and how do I draw them, what kind of shapes do they take, over and over again, like just hours of videos. So it's tough. No, there's no sugarcoating, you know.
Hmm.
I mean, if I had children, I would probably advise against it unless they were like really up for it and they're like, absolutely, I can do this. You know, I can put the work in, whatever. You know, you might just spend a bunch of money on education and end up with no job. You know? Yep.
Yeah, that's very true. Actually, a lot of things we try to stress in the club is that we get a lot of students that just walk in and want to join and say, "Hey, I want to do concept art," and I never want to advise against it, but I always say it's insanely hard and it's super saturated, and you're never like you have to really, really have like a deep wanting to chew through everything that has to do with concept art in order to make it.
Mhm.
Because if you ask almost anybody whose heart truly is into it, or any professional, they can tell you half a dozen horror stories that if the end goal sounds pretty okay to you, you would chew through anyway. But if you're just wanting to do art and you're just hopping on the I want to be a concept artist bandwagon, could almost destroy a person. So I definitely agree on that last part. You really gotta want to do it more than anything else.
You
And
gotta want it, and you gotta have the work ethic to follow through.
that's true.
That's all. Yeah, if you want to do it for a living, if you want to do it for fun, oh, you know, by all means, like go ahead and make it a hobby or slowly develop it. I think
Hmm.
that might almost be a better option for some people that are unsure, yet of the choices they want to make in life or whatever. Like, if I had to do it all over again, I definitely probably wouldn't have gone to the college I did because, like, as I told you, I got kind of a limited amount of knowledge out of it. I feel,
Hmm.
um, but at the same time, when I started, I didn't really know that I wanted to do this either. So I suppose it kind of helped me develop that goal while I was there. So it serves some purpose.
Sure, it's
Yeah,
got to be good for
I have
something.
I have mixed feelings about the whole college thing. Like, I'd say at least really do good research on schools and like programs, and consider like the more like non-traditional ones like Fengzu's school and so on. And see if you are gonna go to school, make sure it's one where you're gonna get value out of your money, and ones that are really strict and like very um, just dense, like you said. That will really push you hard.
Got it.
Because otherwise, there's tons of schools, art schools, and so on that like they're just degree factories, and they're like, if you give us give me your money, and we'll give you a degree. But it's like that also means that your degree doesn't mean shit. So excuse my French.
No, it's totally fine. Although, like, your school didn't really press as hard as you in terms of education and like burning in those foundational skills inside of you, as much as let's say Fangzhou school would you still say the networking opportunities and the people you got to meet were at least somewhat worth it?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I don't know if they were entirely worth it. I mean, I didn't pay a ton for my school because I took all the steps to like go on the cheap. So I got whatever amount I could get from grants from FAFSA and stuff. I did have to take loans, but also whatever money I had from part-time jobs I used to pay. I lived with my parents the whole time. I commuted from Chicago suburb for like hour and a half, I think, each way. Just train, walking, everything. To get to the college. And, um, basically, I didn't end up with like an enormous sum. Like, it was manageable. Like,
Mhm.
I've most of it paid off now. The payments are so small. Like, I uh, don't even want to bother spending money paying the rest of it off until the actual 10 years run out.
Wow. Okay.
But where were we? Sorry, I get like carried away. Worth of school. Okay, so I didn't pay a ton, but I guess given that, like, I did get something out of it. There was some 2D training within it. There was one really good teacher in particular that I'm still friends with, that taught us a lot of the like fundamentals. At least got us kind of started on the right foot. This was towards the end of my schooling there. And some of the 3D skills I learned have come in handy because I've used 3D to create as like a bait to create some of the buildings in particular for the first game that I made stuff for.
Mm-hmm.
So I would make like a gray kind of render of a building that was in a 3D software, and then I would color over it in like Photoshop or other stuff, and put textures on. So it was kind of like a mixed style that really helped me get those like isometric angles easily because you can set the software to like just export it in a certain way at a certain like perspective. And then so there was those 3D skills, animation skills. Um, there was some 2D skills that I got out of it. And in terms of the connections and the people, absolutely. Because those few friends I knew that probably recommended me at NetherRealm, that probably meant something. So I got to know them there. They got to know me. I got to see how good they were. They saw how good I was. And all these like type of knowledge, ends up coming out when they're working somewhere or whatever. Or if I'm working somewhere and somebody asks me, do you know a guy that can sound or something? And I did know one from a college, and he worked with us on the second game. He did all the sound effects, so I hooked him up with like a little job both ways. So that is, I'm sure, worth something, and something you wouldn't necessarily get if you're completely just self-trained in the home. And third, fourth, I guess, I did get like that very initial hookup for that, like while still students, that zombie that we worked on pixel art. So, which kind of started everything, So in a way, the college might even be responsible for, the whole trajectory of my career, from like a very, early, who knows, what I would have done if that wasn't my first project and I didn't work with those guys in, LA, but, or San Francisco rather, sorry. Maybe I would have gone like a different path. Maybe I would have still been successful. I don't know. But, things went like they did. And the school obviously was directly or indirectly a bit responsible in like several of those areas, including like the NetherRealm job, I'm sure. Mm-hmm. So I'm saying, yeah, I'm sure something to be gained, by making friends with other people that will end up in the industry later, and learning. Yeah, I guess it's just the quality of the education itself is what I critique usually, and just the value for money. Because the teachers, some there are good ones, there's bad ones. I felt the vast majority, even in like the 3D areas, animation and so on, like they weren't good enough themselves to be in the industry. Like it looked like. I'm not saying that's why they were doing the teaching. I know that's a common joke of like, oh, you can't actually do it, so you teach it or whatever. Like I'm not gonna go far doing that all the time. Like maybe some people, I'm sure they just like to teach others, and I've enjoyed like mentoring other students in classes and so on as well. Like I do find that appealing. But some of them just they themselves weren't that good to where I'm like, you can. There's only so little to gain, and secondly, some of them just weren't strict enough and weren't hard enough on the students, in terms of grading and giving enough homework and like pushing them enough, There's people that have like drive, like, and I felt I did, at least by the time I got to college, that like I would put in the extra work on the assignments. I would, make my whatever designs I was doing, take the extra step and, take whatever skills I had at the time and, really push them to the limit, really put the hours, every week. But a lot of other kids didn't, and maybe it doesn't matter what school you go to. You can't really force people. Like I'm very sure people go to Feng's Academy and they just don't have what it takes. They don't really learn, But at least they really push them there. I think that's worth more worth the money than more lax schools that don't have programs that are developed as much or specified as much. The second thing is in this industry, like they tend to be behind the times a lot. They're not necessarily like up on the latest techniques or software or like whatever as much as they try. That's just a problem with like in general. They tend to be slow and adaptive. Mm-hmm. And that's not every school. Like I'm sure again some of the schools that I've praised do a fine job of that. At least from what I see, their students' work is like incredible. So nothing against them, but. The school I went to and some of the schools I hear about that are just more traditional colleges in America, not as rigorous and not as with the times when it comes to 2D, 3D art and whether it's video games or movies as they should be to really prepare people. I don't feel if you just did like kind of had to the bare minimum or like kind of an average amount of work for what they request of you and you graduated after 4 years, I don't think you'd be ready. You wouldn't be at the point where like you'd put your art up and people would actually find you to hire you. That answers your question.
Oh yeah, it answers it perfectly. Basically, it shows that the networks and connection are important, but it's like you said before, you just have to get good. And if the school's not really helping you or allowing you to get good,
Right.
as good as you should be from the industry,
Right.
that devalues the school. But at least it shows that, like, even if you come from a school with not the best art program, like a traditional school that just pumps out art degrees if you pay them enough, you can still end up in a position that's pretty like you can still find your way in a AAA studio. You just have to put in a little bit more elbow grease.
You're gonna have to put a lot of work in regardless, whether you're self-taught, whether you go to a good school or whether you go to a bad school. But I'm saying in terms of value for your money, the good school is gonna give you more and they're gonna push you more and they're gonna really show you how to train yourself best because those guys know, as opposed to more average art schools, that will, they'll teach you a lot of like the more traditional ways of drawing. They'll do pencil and pen and figure drawing and still lives and stuff like that, which it has some value, but like at the end of the day, you're going to be working digital all the time, so it's not like fully applicable. It's like some value, not a ton, and they won't tell you much about like the industry. At least those type of teachers. Like I'm talking more traditional art teachers. So you can learn something from them, but they won't know anything about this world, concept world, the game world, and so on. They likely work in, more the, I don't know what you even call it, like just making work and putting it in studios for people to buy or whatever. Like, it's a completely different universe.
True.
Than, most concept artists aren't like interested in that,
Yeah. But it does like help build a solid foundation of those foundational skills that you
Yeah,
said.
the foundational skills do help. Yeah, because I remember I took, even at that school, I believe I started off with like, I think it was like drawing one or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And we did a lot of still lives and just drawing objects and learning some perspective and things like that. And absolutely, I did a bunch of work from that class, and I'm sure it helped me develop. And stuff like that will help, just as going to like a local figure drawing like session would.
So
about one more thing. I think you summarized it pretty well in that like the connections help, but without the skills to back them up, they mean nothing.
Of course.
Because if you don't have the skills, like first of all, the people aren't going to recommend you. Because generally, like if I'm working, let's just say with those two guys, and they ask me, oh, we're looking for like a sound designer. Do you know anybody? I knew a guy and I knew he was good. That's why I recommended him. But I didn't recommend him because he's my friend.
Right.
I recommended it because I knew he'd make like good sound for our game and it would do well because I was invested in the game. Mm-hmm. So the first thing that comes is like, are they good? Not like, do you know them or whatever.
Okay. So of those skills that we're saying that are really important, if you could put a ratio of how important software knowledge is not in terms of software knowledge and compared to like those foundational skills we're talking about, like how would you weigh them?
Like a percentage?
Yeah. Like out of 10, like would you say like it would be 9%?
I'd say the foundational skills are most of it. So yeah, if you're just amazing at drawing in general, drawing and painting and shading, mm-hmm. I'd say, obviously there's a learning curve to going full digital and to creating, stuff or making stuff look how you want it to look, using a different set of tools is there. But I would say it's like, I don't know, 20-25% of it. Most of it's like, I think it's like, 8 or 80% like just basic skills, basic drawing skills. Because, drawing on a tablet or, whether it's a Cintiq or like a regular just plastic one is really, it's pretty similar. Like, if you have good, pencil skills and you're able to do a good line and you can draw, anatomy and you understand perspective and all that stuff, like it applies directly. there's things in Photoshop and so on that I can obviously speed those things up. You can make straight lines really easily by like shift clicking or whatever. You can shade in large areas quickly, as opposed to painting, by hand on a piece of paper or whatever it is. A lot of this, there's stuff that makes it much easier. Obviously, you still need to know all that if you want to do this. Like, I don't think there's many concept artists that work on paper anymore. They might start on paper, maybe. I don't know, but there's very few of them that submit like final works of, here's what an environment or this character is going to look like in World of Warcraft or whatever it is, like in painting.
That's true.
But I feel the actual software knowledge, I think, is a small part of it. I mean, personally, for me, it might be a slightly bigger part because I have like kind of like I don't know how to call it. My my fingers are like tired easily if I like grip a pen hard and like press hard for like a few hours. So like I get kind of, my hand fatigues really quickly. So I've like developed basically a way of painting along with like a style for a lot of my characters that facilitates it, like taking it easy, which is usually I use, for example, a ton of lasso tool, and like I just select shapes and whatever, and like I fill them in with color or patterns, and like I can edit them and whatnot. And use layers where it's appropriate, where it helps. But make a lot of selections basically to limit my stuff. Like I don't do as much actual like select a brush and just paint as I'm sure a lot of concept artists do. But just this way is easier for me, and I'd say like in terms of the software part, like I use maybe a bit more than what I just told you, but on a basic level, much. A lot of those basic skills carry over almost directly.
Got that. Oh, one of those skills I'm really curious on hearing your answer of is 3D skills, because the industry is gearing more and more and more towards like applying through 3D knowledge to 2D painting in order to create like faster, more accurate concept art. Do you think it's like absolutely necessary for students to really like hone in on those skills, or should they go the more just get really good at one thing approach? I know everyone has a different answer. I'm just curious on hearing yours.
Yeah, I've heard this discussion a lot about how much does 3D matter in concept art, and I think on a long enough timeline, things like ZBrush is getting so good that it might almost entirely take over, especially in certain areas, like especially particularly doing like aliens and like detailed sci-fi characters and vehicles and so on. Like it's super good at and applicable and whatnot. I personally, I've messed with ZBrush a bit. I never got like super good with it, and haven't touched it since. But I think they're very important. But I still believe, like at least in the current year or whatever, you could just entirely hone in on like Photoshop and kind of traditional drawing and painting and design. If you're good and you're fast with it, and you can churn out designs quickly, like clients need them, you'll do well, and if your skills are up to par. In terms of where 3D plays a part, it's always an asset, I would say, to know. I wouldn't start your education with that necessarily. I would maybe pick it up alongside it. Particularly if you plan to do a lot of environment work, it'll help you a lot because you can create, even just very rough scenes out of boxes and spheres and whatnot in a space. You can throw a light on it, and I heard people would say you can set the camera, you can make the shot whatever you want it to be by just manipulating a few objects in a few minutes. You don't have to redraw the whole thing. You don't have to even redraw a line drawing to show a client like, hey, this scene, this still in your movie might look like this. You can just be like, oh, put the camera here, put the light here. Do you like this? If not, oh, do you like this other camera shot? With the same objects in the same area. And then once they're like, oh yeah, that's the one. You can grab it and either detail it a bit more in 3D or just take the render and like paint over it in Photoshop right away. And a lot of the math for like perspective and lighting is already done for you, so that helps you a lot. Now that said, you should still learn how those things work. I think traditionally, but in terms of like speeding your workflow up, that can be huge. I don't do as much environments like as of late, so haven't do much 3D, but I do still have the skill. So if I need to, like, I can hop into. Personally, I know Maya mostly, Autodesk Maya,
Hmm.
just a regular 3D software, and I'm decent with it. So if I need to, like, I can create some like shapes or environments and so on, and pick renders. That's where it's huge. For characters, it's a little less though. It's really cool for like things like monsters and demons and so on. Just things like ZBrush almost naturally apply to that kind of crazy looking, really alien shapes, and it's fun to play with. I know a lot of people, a lot of artists that just almost all they use is ZBrush, and they turn out these great, just original pieces with it, and they're almost, well, they're not really good to go in a game because we can't run stuff that's that high polygon count, but it's a good base, and you can definitely give that to the artist, and they could reduce it to an actual in-game model, in not that much time, and it's a huge help as opposed to just drawing. But it seems like still for most of the industry, most of the companies and stuff you see, ArtStation, like most of the pipeline is still like, here's a 2D, environment or character, and it's handed off to the 3D guys, and they do that for the most part. I think some concept artists simply use 3D as a kind of a potential, additional helping tool or something to speed up the process right now. It's not like absolutely necessary. I think it may become more and more necessary in the future, but the future might be pretty far still. It's hard to say. Now we're talking about predictions, which I don't want to be caught on tape saying that it's going to be so.
Yeah,
That,
understood.
but I can say that, yeah, right now, for at least what I'm personally doing, I don't really use much 3D, even though I have the skills and drawing skills alone, and that's it. And, again, I use a lot of the shortcuts and brushes and tricks and textures in Photoshop, to speed things up. So again, there's that kind of knowledge of software that it mostly helps with speed, I would say.
Got it.
Speed and like getting a ton of amount of detail quickly.
Okay. Yeah, I actually like that answer a lot. Earlier this week, I interviewed this one artist, and he told me about. I asked him a similar question, and he, instead of the example of 3D, we were talking about photo bashing, and he told me a story about how the senior concept artists at Polygon, they could finish an entire fully rendered concept art piece by the time a photo basher just finished getting ready their references. So I think I think like I agree with what you say. Like it's really good as an asset or something to help you speed up your workflow, such as the age-old question of should I get a regular Wacom tablet or should I get a Cintiq? But the idea of just being really good in one thing and using the new fancy shiny thing as just an add-on would be the best for most students. You know?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, super cool. Okay, and last question of the day would be, what are your personal goals or aspirations for the future? Like, what exactly are you working towards and hoping to accomplish within the upcoming years?
Hmm. Well, I want to keep working with my kind of the indie team that I've been with for years now.
Mm-hmm.
'Cause, it's been fun. It's a bit of a different experience. It's not a strictly concept art experience because, well, to be honest, like concept art is strictly concept art is maybe 2 to 5% of what I do with them. A lot
Mm-hmm.
of the rest of it is the actual in-game art. There's logo work, and lately on our last game, I've actually been doing a lot of the game design too. I've been helping them with
Oh, wow.
actually coming up with ideas. I've been playtesting our own games and being like, hey, this works, this doesn't work. Let's tune this a little better. Let's maybe add this or try this. And they seem to value my feedback. And we've been like working more and more closely on the actual design, or with the main designer at least. All three of us kind of pitch in, but there's the one of the main guys is just a programmer, and the other guy's a designer. All three of us kind of pitch in. The designer does most of the actual, getting into the weeds and details of design, like the little things, of entering values and so on.
Mm.
But I really, I like that, like kind of from the start, I actually kind of wanted to do design, but it's not a thing you can do out of school or even train for. Nobody really hires designers, quote unquote. People, companies, and whether it's Indy or AAA, hire people with skill. People that can either draw really well, or people that can model really well, or people that can program really well. But from there on, you can maybe, um, get into some other stuff, including, design. And I think that's also easier to do in an indie studio because it's a smaller studio and they're going to be like more willing to, maybe take your ideas into account and work with you. I'm not saying you should like butt, your head into that stuff, but if the people you're working with are receptive, then maybe you can tell them about your ideas. Don't be like, don't come to a designer and just say like, oh, I have all these cool ideas and you should listen to them and whatnot. Like, don't force it. But it's easier when the team is small. They're going to be much more like your equals than your superiors, and the work roles are much less rigid. As I said, we all share some roles and wear different hats and so on. So it's much more likely you might get to do some other thing you might want to do. And that the game side I like, so I'm going to keep working with them. And my plans for the future with them is we're wrapping up this last game we did. We did a bunch of ports. Now it's on mobile. It's going to be on console soon. I think they just announced it at E3.
Oh, wait. Can you say what game it is?
Project High Rise. I think they're calling it Architect's Edition for the consoles. So we just did that.
Oh man,
and since we released that just in between release, which was I think a year and a half ago till now, like we did several expansion packs or / DLCs for it as well, that I worked on and helped do some of the design on, helped do some of the testing and tuning on, and so on. So I like that varied kind of work with them.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it's not strictly concept art, but it's personally interesting. So I want to keep that up. And from here on out, we're gonna, I'm sure, be working on some new games where my input, like in terms of design, is going to be probably even larger because I'm going to be around and at an earlier point before the art phase even starts. So right now we're just in the talks of like, oh, what is this game going to play as and stuff like that, and like I find that to be fascinating. And I'm sure everybody does. Like all your friends that are into games or play games are always like, oh, I would do this thing or whatever. So imagine actually doing that for work or on a game that will actually happen.
Right.
Not many people that get to be designers. So like when I get to participate in any design, like to me that's exciting. So I want to keep doing that. In terms of other work, I still want to like work in some like just regular concept art, just doing smaller gigs for the people that reach out and like have characters or stories or games, that they want visuals that they're seeking.
Mm-hmm.
And the cool thing about that is, especially if I have like a main, more solid job like I do with the indie games,
Mm-hmm.
I can kind of choose, which of those projects I want to take. And if it's a cool project that I know I might have fun with, I can take it and make money along with that. I really like that, having that kind of choice, as well as having like some extra money that's not necessarily tied to game sales or hours I put in, with the game.
Right.
So it's like just an additional source of revenue. So you're basically not completely dependent on one. It's just good to have. I'll keep doing that. As soon as these requests come in, like I'll work with people. I'm sure things that I'm interested in. If it's something that's totally boring, I might turn it down. Or if I just have too much stuff going on and not enough time for my other hobbies, like I might not take on more work at a certain time. I try not to like. I think Feng Zeus talked about this as in his early days. Just go hard 7 days a week, take every single job, and like invoice people for stuff he's done, and just go crazy. Like to me, it's. I really respect that, but like, I don't want to live a life where all I do is like work.
Yeah.
I want to have some time for other hobbies and hanging out with family or significant others and watching movies and so on. So I like to pace it kind of more as we're close to it, like a normal full time job and have time off, and have some weekends off and whatnot.
That's awesome.
I don't want to take on too much. Besides that, like really long term, I mean, I'd like to develop more like my personal world and stuff. Like a lot of the stuff in ArtStation, I have kind of like a theme going, like a something that could maybe be like an art book or like a comic or or maybe a game someday. I don't know. Maybe it'll be maybe a movie, maybe an animation. Who knows? But like I think I like to create this I don't know made up worlds that are rich and cool and like are all your own and make up the world, like write things down about it. About the characters, about the surroundings, and about the vehicles and all that stuff. And I kind of like that in long term potential. And maybe many years down the road that might like materialize into something more physical that might actually sell or release or whatever. But for now, it's just fun, kind of. It's good portfolio material. I mean, like to think like a lot of people have referenced like, the characters I did for my own world and environments I did or whatever. Just coming up with my own ideas as like a style or a look or an aesthetic that they found pleasing or interesting or applicable to their own projects and that they want to see from me. So clearly, it kind of works. So I would say that's another maybe tip for people with portfolios, just to don't always go just all over the place. From place to character to a different place to a completely different intellectual property, if you will, and maybe like try to develop something consistent and like stick to it a bit. Because that helps with design too. Because if you already have kind of a world that you created in your head as well as maybe a couple drawings that already has a certain feel to it, a certain theme to it, like that, it's quite a bit easier to then look at a blank page and be like, okay, let me maybe add to this world, or let's see what this kind of vehicle would look in this world, or what this kind of occupation would look in this world. It's like a starting point, like something for you to hook onto and keep creating stuff. So I want to keep doing that, and maybe make it into something more bigger. But if not, it's cool to like I have other gigs coming up, to work myself with and stay busy.
Okay. Well, that's an awesome answer. I really hope you the best of luck with that. And that's all the time we honestly have for this interview. So
Yeah.
thank you. Yeah, but thank you so much for agreeing for this. Thank you so much for everything you shared, all the information, and best of luck with everything you're working towards now. I really hope your game that was announced recently does really well. I'll make sure to shout it out on everything I have, and yeah, best of luck with everything.
Yes, I appreciate it.
Okay. Oh, sorry.
Goodbye.
Take care. See ya.
Yeah.